Let's begin. Welcome. This is Lily Karazi. I'm the Director of Special Initiatives at ACTA, the Alliance for California Traditional Arts. Just some quick Zoom etiquette. Please mute yourselves so we can avoid background noise. And we're recording this tonight, so if you wish to turn off your video camera, that's up to you. So as many of you know, ACTA is a statewide organization with offices in San Francisco, Fresno, and Los Angeles. I'm usually based in ACTA's San Francisco office, but I'm speaking to you today from Chumash country here in central coastal California. Here with me this evening are Jaime Cortez, Performing Arts Officer at the Hewlett Foundation, and Amy Kitchener, co-founder and executive director of ACTA. The three of us will give you an overview of the program and we'll answer as many questions as we can in this short session. You can ask your questions by using the chat box on your screen. We will collect the questions and answer them at the end of the presentation. We're asking that you type your questions rather than unmuting yourself so that we can answer as many questions as possible and so that we can bunch together like questions that more than one person has. We ask that you try to keep your questions of a general nature as much as possible, rather than asking questions that are specific to your organization or your proposal, which can be answered by writing to me at the 50C help email, or you can direct them to me with contact information that's both on the website and will be shared shortly in this presentation. As I said, we're recording this session so that we can make it available on the website on February 1st. I would also like to acknowledge our community anchors, and that's the East Bay Center for Performing Arts in Richmond, as well as the School for Arts and Culture in San Jose, who have helped us today get the word out about the initiative and also information meetings. Like so many of you here tonight, you are part of an ecosystem that supports traditional arts. You are important allies to the field, and you help to foster and nurture artists and communities. So please visit their websites, which will be in your chat box shortly. And in fact, if you would like to put your own organization website in the chat box, please do so now. Thank you all for your help, and let's get started. Next slide, please.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to participate in this information session for applicants to the Hewlett 50 Arts Commissions administered by ACTA. My name is Jaime Cortez, and I am one of the three program officers in the performing arts at the Hewlett Foundation. Some of you I know because I've met you in person in the past, and some of you I know by name, and some of you are new to me, but you're all, I'm really glad to see all of you here, and I'm glad you're interested in this opportunity. I speak to you from the Watsonville area, the unceded Ohlone territory of the Awaswas-speaking UP tribe. The Amamutsu tribal band, comprised of the descendants of the indigenous people taken to missions Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during the Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and to heal from historic trauma. The Hewlett Foundation, I want to tell you a little bit about us. We have been supporting the arts in the San Francisco Bay Area for 50 years. Today, we provide grants to more than 160 organizations with approximately $20 million in annual funding. Our preference is for multi-year general operating support grants that enable the grantees to chart their own course. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about the Hewlett 50 Arts Commission. They were established in 2017 to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Hewlett Foundation. And these commissions represent the foundation's ongoing commitment to the performing arts. Over 5 cycles, the Hewlett Foundation will award 50 commissioning grants of $150,000 each. Nonprofit organizations who are the applicants are not required to have the arts as their primary mission. We encourage both arts-based nonprofits as well as nonprofits doing work in diverse issue areas to apply. So that can include, for instance, social service agencies, clinics, environmental organizations, etc. We do require that the new works be premiered in the Bay Area within 3 years of receiving the commission, and that we will award 10 grants per year clustered by artistic discipline. I recommend that you visit the Hewlett Foundation website to learn more about our past awards in music, and then the second round in theater, and last year's round was in dance and movement-based performance. This round, the folk and traditional arts round, is the 4th of 5 rounds. In the chat box, I believe Crystal is going to place the link in case you're interested in looking at who the past awardees have been thus far. Next slide, please. So this is an award that's now in its 4th year. The first year we did 10 commissions in music composition. That was 2017. And then in 2018, we did 10 commissions in theater and spoken word and performance art. In 2019, we did awards in dance and movement-based performance. This year, we are going to be doing the folk and traditional arts, and next year, the final round will be in media arts. So we're going to be, as I mentioned, we're going to be focusing on the folk and traditional arts, and that's why it's important for me to just take a moment to talk about Hewlett's relationship with ACTA, and in this iteration of the Hewlett 50 Arts Commission. So if we could go to the next slide, please. For this iteration of the folk and traditional arts round, Hewlett has contracted with ACTA to administer the grants process. We recognize that ACTA has played a pivotal role all across this state as a grant-making intermediary, providing funding and training and support to all kinds of organizations in what we call the traditional arts. They will be your main contact in this process. While ACTA's primary role is to facilitate the process, they will not be making the final decisions on which proposals will be awarded commissions. Those decisions will be made by a panel from the performing arts team of the Hewlett Foundation with recommendations that will come to us from a series of review processes that ACTA will facilitate for us. So basically, ACTA is going to send to Hewlett a list of finalists, and from those finalists, Hewlett will select the 10 awardees for this round. ACTA will be the place that you go to if you have questions or you need guidance on your application. That important contact information will be shared with you in this presentation and can also be found on the website of ACTA. The Hewlett Foundation is so excited to work with ACTA for this round of the commissions. We're going to be responsible for paying out the awards at the end of this process, and we'll also be working with the awardees to support them with their publicity and communications once they've received their commissions. I want to go ahead and turn this over to Amy Kitchener, who is the founder and executive director of ACTA.
Thank you, Jaime.
Thank you.
I'm speaking to you today from the homelands of the Western Mono, Chukchansi, and Yokuts peoples in Central California. And it's a stormy, stormy night. I hope everyone's electricity holds out while we're in this with you tonight. We are honored to be of service and to apply our longstanding grant-making experience in the folk and traditional arts to support the Hewlett Foundation and to administer the process. This is just an amazing gift that Hewlett is making to the field. And it's an opportunity to dream big and to garner support for your vision. I am just blown away. I think this could be possibly the largest commission in the folk and traditional arts in the country that we're about to see. As many of you know, ACTA has been working for folk and traditional arts since our inception in 1997. And the fact that we can assist with this largest award is an honored responsibility. So let's begin by tackling the first big question, which is, next slide, what are the folk and traditional arts? The folk and traditional arts are expressions that are learned as part of the cultural life of a community. Members of these communities may share a common ethnic heritage, cultural mores or customs, language, religion, occupation, or geographic region. And these traditions are shaped by the aesthetics and values of shared culture, and ultimately are passed on from generation to generation through observation, conservation, and practice. They're often passed on through oral tradition, and they represent time-honored vernacular education systems. They flourish as they continually change and adapt to new settings and circumstances while remaining informed by shared ancestral knowledge. So just, you can think of a lot of examples, and even just, who's here in the room and the organizations you represent. But, think broad, and Japanese koto music, African-American gospel music, Oaxacan mask making used in dance ritual, as well as queer voguing are all examples of folk and traditional art forms. Each of these expressions is strongly rooted in a specific ethnic, regional, or cultural community. Next slide. The Hewlett 50 Arts Commissions seek to support a wide variety of traditional art forms and to show the breadth and creativity of living practices rooted in cultural communities. At the heart of the Hewlett 50 Arts Commissions is performance and public sharing to benefit both residents of the Bay Area and beyond with bold works of art that give voice and value to the idea of creation. Performance genres include dance, music, storytelling, and theater, and also other traditional arts expressions that have a strong performative element. So this is a really important nuance here, is that we are acknowledging that for many folk and traditional arts practice, the idea of performance is not bounded by a site, a stage, or an audience. And it will be really up to you and the communities of practice to define what performance means for your community. And it will be defined in multiple ways. For example, dance traditions that are part of ceremonial life, like sacred hula or Khmer classical dance, were intended to serve as an intermediary between humans and the divine. So, this is a very different audience than is different in nature than what we might think of in the Western canon, where performance involves a stage, and audience, and seats. So the discussion is nuanced, and if this is relevant to your proposal, please discuss how the project can include public sharing in an appropriate and respectful way, so that the integrity of the art form and cultural community is really honored. I'm going to turn the mic back to Lily, and she's going to walk us through eligibility and the building blocks of the application process.
Thank you, Amy. So I will be your point person, and I'll try to answer questions for you through this process. Again, the information is on the website, and we'll share it again before we finish. Next slide, please. So first, to be eligible to apply for funding, the lead applicant must be a nonprofit organization, and you have to be located within one of the 11 counties surrounding the San Francisco Bay. The initiative does not fund individual artists directly. The lead applicant is responsible for identifying the artist to commission, as well as any other collaborating partners. The lead artist can live anywhere in the world. but the lead applicant is headquartered in 11 counties.
Established anti-government extremist groups. For more on this, let's
I'm hearing some feedback. If you could kindly mute yourselves, thank you. Okay. So the lead applicant must be a nonprofit organization. This is sometimes referred to as a public charity. They must be headquartered in 11 counties, as we just discussed. The lead applicant must have an annual operating budget of $50,000 or more for 2 consecutive years. We understand that these are unusual pandemic times and that many budgets have shrunk or even expanded in unpredictable ways. So we ask that you you average your budget from the fiscal years of 2018 and 2019. You may consider collaborating with more than one organization for your project, which is acceptable. However, you must choose a single applicant. And a group without 501c3 or nonprofit status can use a fiscal sponsor as the lead applicant. In the application guidelines, we post a link to help you learn more about the different kinds of relationships and services that a fiscal sponsor can provide. We'll place that now in the chat box, and you can always refer back to the guidelines for this important link. So finally, the lead artist is really the center of the commission. This proposal is a partnership between an organization, an artist, or culture bearer. And the lead artist fee must minimally be $50,000. Even if you are an ensemble or a collective, you must name a lead applicant for the purposes of this grant. Next slide, please. So we have 10 commissions in folk and traditional arts, which will be awarded in 2021. And these works will premiere in the Bay Area by 2024, which means you essentially have a 3-year window to create and to premiere work. The lead applicant, the nonprofit organization, and the lead artist can only submit one application. However, a lead applicant can also act as a fiscal sponsor for others. So potentially an example of this might be World Arts West would like to submit their own proposal, but they will also act as a fiscal sponsor for another application, extending those services. And importantly, projects that are currently receiving the Gerbode Special Awards in the Arts or Creative Work Fund grants may apply, but must apply with a new or different project. You may not apply with the same project. Next slide, please. Yes. Okay, so here is our timeline in brief. The lead applicant or nonprofit completes an online letter of intent by the deadline. The deadline is March 8th, and our applications are open now. We will assemble a national panel of reviewers to make recommendations regarding the finalists. Everyone will be notified of their status on April 15th. 25 proposals will be invited to develop full application proposals by May 18th. This involves a bit more detailed fleshing out of your ideas, your timeline, and your budget. Finalists will be asked to submit a memorandum of understanding detailing rights and responsibilities of the lead applicant and the lead artist. Finally, another round, a national panel will review the final proposals and make recommendations to the Hewlett Foundation Performing Arts team, who make the final decisions on the 10 commissions. And the grants will be announced to the public in the fall. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at the online application. This application is hosted on the Submittable platform, and you have to register first, which means simply you create a username and a password. And once you've signed up, you'll have access to the application form. This is what you see on your screen. It's the LOI application title page. And you have some basic components. The first is eligibility. You'll answer some questions which determine your eligibility, and we've reviewed many of them so far. Where is the lead applicant headquartered? What is your organizational budget? Have you received an award previously, etc.? Next, EIN verification and applicant info. This number is the number assigned to your nonprofit organization. We'll ask for address, email, contact information, etc. Next is project info and narrative, which is where your creative voice is shining. You tell us about your proposal vision. We next ask you for a project budget, and there's a budget example to reference and a template to use. Finally, work sample instructions for what is extremely important, which is the lead artist work, and organization information, which will ask for mission statement, financial information, which helps with the eligibility purposes. Next slide, please. So now we're going to jump to review criteria, which will determine the selection of the final commissions. And just as a reminder, these criteria are described in detail on the website in the guidelines. I'm going to ask Amy to come back to give us some framing for this next section.
Thanks, Lily. So here's the opportunity to think really boldly about your proposal, and to take your vision to scale is what makes the Hewlett 50 a remarkable opportunity. We encourage you to think big, to consider working with your dream artist or culture bearer to propose an original or thoughtful idea. One of the unfortunate misconceptions about folk and traditional arts is that they remain fixed or rigid, when in fact that's not so. So it might be helpful to reinforce that and say that traditional arts practices are informed by cultural context, history, and lineage. But in order for these expressions to thrive in the future, they continually change, adapt, and develop. So thinking about what is new in the proposed project can mean several things. And it's really up to you to articulate that in your proposals. So, you know, ideas of what's new in the traditional arts, it could be new compositions, new choreographies, new narratives that are within the respectful parameters of your traditions. But we would also encourage thinking about new partnerships, taking the work to a new scale, perhaps conducting new research that informs a performance, or a type of collaboration that has never happened before. So new is really meant to be very broad and roomy. And you know, we really look to what that means in the context of your traditional arts practice. Back to Lily.
Okay, thank you, Amy. So I think an overall idea to keep in mind as you draft your proposal is that you are the experts. You should provide enough information so that someone can understand the context of your form. What is your form? Why is it important and to whom? And how has this expression been transmitted over time? You are the living practitioners, and you can best describe to someone who is outside of your community to help them understand the aesthetics that make your arts expression unique and meaningful. So among that, we try to get at some ideas. Artistry and lineage. Lineage here means, refers to a question of how has this art form been learned or transmitted? Is there a lineage? Does this come from oral histories, an academy, an institution, a familial line? Is it related to a religious practice? What is the training and by whom? Your project concept refers to your bold and creative vision to take your idea to scale, to dream big and expansively. What will this enable you to do or realize? And you'll talk about that in your project design and planning. Is your timeline realistic? Do you have the right people in place to carry off this proposal? What are the qualifications and the experience that this full complement of people will bring to the project to make it viable? And your timeline example is where we would ask you to list important milestones that will help you achieve this vision. Audience and impact will vary depending on your art form and your vision. What does audience mean in your case? And that was referred to by Amy. What is the appropriate audience in the context of this art form? And impact is also relative to your expression. Perhaps this is the first time in decades that a particular form is being seen or an adaptation is being mounted. What would something like this mean to your audience or your community? When we talk about financial capacity, this is demonstrated by your budget. And we want to recognize this is a letter of intent, and surely things will shift and are in process as you write this application. So please think of the budget as not written in stone, but more of a demonstration and understanding of how to budget the work that you have at hand or are proposing. And it is okay if the Hewlett Commission is your only source of income. And it's also okay if you're planning to raise more money beyond the Hewlett Commissions. Next slide, please. So we've given you a lot of information this evening. And remember, we'll record this and it will be available on the website by February 1st. We're going to go on to questions. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, please type your questions in the text box on your screen. And we're asking you to type rather than unmuting you so we can answer as many questions as possible. And we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. And if they're of general interest, I am available to you to talk to you about your case-specific questions after our meeting during the week office hours. In addition, we have frequently asked questions on the website, and we'll update them with things that we have not thought through to this point. So at this time, I'll ask Jen what our first question is. Thank you.
Yeah, hey there. Yeah, we just got one question so far. So feel free, anyone can go ahead and type out your question in the chat there. But we've got one question from Eric. Eric here from Parangal. Thank you for the workshop and opportunity. Is the premiere piece specific to one culture, or could it be a combination?
Okay, thank you, Eric, for that question. And I would say this is a proposal of your vision, your creative vision. And the watchword is, if that's the case, you certainly would portray your work with the most respect for the traditions that you're working with, exploring connections or a rationale. What is important is that these commissions are not necessarily meant to be a showcase of culture after culture in a kind of review form, that they should really be, you should be thinking about distinct works and pieces that can stand on their own. So without understanding the specifics, I would say whatever you are planning to propose, you understand the integrity of this kind of work.
I would just maybe add a little bit to that one, is that in, how you understand the two kind of traditions that you might be, or two or more traditions that you might be including in your piece. The really key thing is, can you offer a strong rationale about why you want to combine these things? That's going to be, I think, what matters. And that kind of connects to what Lily was saying about the respect for and demonstrating respect for and understanding of the traditions. Part of it is that if you want to do the hybrid, what's the compelling rationale for that? And I think that will help kind of, the most successful of the, we'll call them hybrid proposals for now, will be the ones who are able to make a really good case about why these forms.
Thank you. Do we have other questions?
Yes, one question from Mary Khan from Ali Akbar College of Music. Mary asks, is it important for the performance or culminating piece to be able to be toured?
It is not a requirement that it tours. It has to be premiered, and certainly if touring is a part of this plan, or if it develops as a result of this premiere to the Bay Area, that's fantastic, but it's not necessarily has to be baked into your proposal. Jaime, is there anything that you want to add to that?
I would just say, don't feel pressured to add touring to your plan, unless it's something that really is speaking to you and you feel like it's important, especially if you have venues that you're pretty sure are going to want to present the work. It's worth mentioning. It won't be a deal breaker either way. It's not going to be the thing that kind of puts your proposal over the top, and it will not weaken the proposal either if you do not have touring. Our emphasis as a place-based funder is Bay Area audiences. So as long as you're serving a Bay Area audience, we're happy for that. And touring is kind of like a cherry on the top, but it's not necessary.
Great. A few more questions. Eric asks, what is the minimum length of performance?
Well, these are significant works. And I think an evening length work is considered at least an hour.
There might be, you might have a rationale about why it needs to be shorter, in which case you should make that case. But I think Lily's guidance is a good one. We are thinking of evening length works, and we know that the meaning of that is, kind of a shaggy one. It can mean different things to different people. But I think 1 hour is a good minimum to be looking at.
Roy asks, is the lead artist restricted to just one person, or can there be more than one lead artist or co-collaborators?
Okay, I'm glad you asked this question, Roy. Thank you. One lead artist needs to be named for this project. However, there have been examples in past commissions, as I understand it, where there is an ensemble or that lead artist works within a collective, right? But one artist needs to be named as lead artist for this commission. There's many different ways that people work in folk and traditional arts in particular, where the naming of a lead artist potentially is problematic or an honor or not an issue whatsoever. But for the purposes of this grant, how you arrange things with your co-collaborators will be really important. But one lead artist needs to be named. And also the same for lead applicant. There's one nonprofit who will be named lead applicant, but you're certainly welcome to work with a number of other organizations for the realization of the project.
Yeah, one other thing to note about the lead artist question, we understand that depending on what tradition artists are working in, they might have a really strong identity of being an ensemble. And the idea of a lead artist doesn't really, define them. For our purposes, though, we want to have a lead artist identified so that the panelists can compare like to like. We want them to compare one lead artist to another lead artist versus comparing one lead artist to a whole ensemble. So that was part of our thinking around that. We just want to be able to compare like to like.
We've got a few more questions. Another one from Roy asking, if international artists are involved in the project, does the Hewlett or ACTA have the ability to help with any visa issues?
Yeah, thank you, Roy. This came up earlier in another meeting. Visa issues are squarely in the hands of the lead organization working with the artist. And I will turn it to Jaime to talk about what Hewlett can provide. But this is part of the gift and of course the complexity of being able to invite a lead artist, one, from your backyard, and two, beyond your backyard, extending to the world. And of course, I'm speaking metaphorically, but the lead artists can come from any part of the world, including right here in California or your hometown. And I'll let Jaime speak about this question.
This is a good question and an important question. I want to reiterate what Lily said and just say that it is really on the lead applicant to make all of the proper legal arrangements for visas and for payment of artists who are from other countries. So that's going to be your responsibility. The limited thing that we can provide is that if you need letters of support for that, where Hewlett says, hi, we gave this grant to the organization. We think they're great, trustworthy organizations, and we support this artist receiving a visa to come and do this performance. That's the extent of what we would be open to. Beyond that, it's going to be on it's going to be the responsibility of the awarded lead applicant. Those of you who have done it in the past know that it can be quite a process. So you should be thinking about that part of it as you're pulling together the application, and maybe even begin doing preliminary research about what it takes to make this happen. In this past round, in the second round, which was theater, one of our awardees had an artist from Romania who they were working with, and unfortunately for them, most of the planning time fell during the era of the Trump administration, and restrictions on travel and on visas were very tight, and it was a really, really hard experience for them to try to deal with the immigration, not the immigration, but the visa process. So just go in with your eyes open, please, and just kind of do your homework and know that it's your responsibility.
The only other question that we had was, I'll just speak it out loud for anyone who missed it, from Devendra asking, can a master or masters of the form travel from some other part of the world to California as part of the grant? I think that Lily was able to speak to that, but wanted to get that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's it for questions.
Yes, and kind of related to that as well is that absolutely you can have artists coming from other parts of the world to work on this in California, and the creation of the piece doesn't have to happen in California or in this area. The premiere does, but it can be created, wherever. So just know that as well.
Okay, so
Quickly, can work samples go beyond just the past 2 years? From Roy.
yeah, your work samples should be current, and current means within the last 5 years.
I have a issue that I think we should talk about is, considering these pandemic times, and what kind of flexibility is there around the premiere and the time frame for this? Maybe we can just talk a little bit about that.
Yes, those are good questions. The pandemic has again and again thwarted our efforts at planning, right? It's going to do what it's going to do, and we have to deal with it. What we found was that, starting in the spring of 2020, we had, I think just in March alone, there were 3 of the projects that were supposed to premiere, and none of them premiered. What's happened then is that we have learned is that we will try to exercise maximum flexibility around that. If because of the pandemic, you find that you need more time for the premiere, then we're gonna then have that discussion with us. If you need to change other elements of it, we're gonna be open to those discussions. With any luck, within a year from now, things are gonna look a lot more like they used to, if we're lucky. And so we are assuming that because this is a 3-year commission, most of the projects would be starting up in 2022 and 2023, maybe 2024 even. So we'll work with you if you have a need for flexibility. Many things are possible in terms of flexibility. Probably not everything is possible, but many things are possible. So just know that we are understanding of the fact that some things are just out of our control because of a big issue like the pandemic.
I think there's a couple more questions in the chat.
Yes. Okay. So Jordan is asking or saying that flexibility of work sample period for one work would be helpful to show the arc of long careers. Did you all want to comment on that, or?
Yeah, I would. I think Jordan and anybody, if this is going to help support your proposal. And you can submit up to 5 minutes of a work sample. So if it's important to understanding the work, the trajectory of the proposal, by all means, make a case for it, as long as we also see why we're looking at an older work sample to understand what might be presented in this project proposal. I think there's a case to be made for many things. And if you're asking that question, there must be a really important information that a panelist might need to make a judgment by seeing old and more contemporary work samples of a lead artist.
I would just add a couple of thoughts to that. How to pull together a work samples is kind of it's a very nuanced thing, and it's so dependent on what you're really trying to get across to us. And I'll give you some thoughts of just what happened in the last cycle, which was the last cycle was for dance and movement-based performance. One of the things we really pushed our finalists on was that the panelists are people who are trained in dance. And for them, seeing a 5-minute video, for instance, full of quick cuts where you only see a second or two and then the next thing and the next, that does not allow them to see how the artist moves, how they transition from one movement to the other, how they pace themselves. So those kinds of work samples were not as successful as just a simple, longer shots that really give a sense of the work. And I think that's what you really want to be looking at. What really showcases this artistry best? And to just kind of, so some of the videos that we got for dance, they were pretty flashy because they had these quick cuts and they looked like a music video, but it really didn't help the panelists understand that choreographer very well. So you need to just really look at these work samples and ask, is this really putting our best foot forward here? You have 5 minutes and it can be one take, one stationary camera take of 5 minutes. It can be, a bunch of shorter ones, you get to choose, but just really be strategic because the work samples are super important. It's all important, but the work samples really do matter.
We've got one more question from Eric asking, is premiere work on 2024 or earlier between the grant period?
You will be awarded in 2021, and your work can premiere before 2024, but that's your window of time. It's a 3-year period. If I understood the question correctly. Yeah.
No more questions for now.
Okay, is this the end? One last, going once, going twice? Okay, well, I want to thank you for coming and joining us this evening. Wonderful artists and colleagues and friends here tonight. And on behalf of Jaime Cortez and Amy Kitchener and Jen Jameson and Crystal, who's behind the scenes, thank you all. And here's the information. You know how to get a hold of your helpline and help person. And I'll look forward to speaking with each of you. So thank you so much. Good night.